What if I told you that the most troubling thing about trauma isn't the actions or experiences themselves, but what they leave behind? Trauma doesn't end when the name calling stops or the marks have faded. It rewires how a young person's brain works and can fundamentally change the way a child sees and interacts with the world. Let's have a little think about why. If a kid adapts to living in danger, then it's not damage, it's survival. Latent vulnerability, the idea that early exposure can change the way the brain functions, not just at a behavioral level, but deep down at the neural and subconscious level too. When a child grows up in a home where they don't feel safe, maybe it's chaotic, inconsistent, frightening, or dangerous, their brain adapts to survive it. But here's the issue. Those same survival strategies don't always switch off. Even in a safer environment, the brain keeps scanning and looking for those problems. That's where the vulnerability comes in. The same wiring that kept the child safe in early environments can make them prone to more anxiety, more depression, and emotional shutdown later in life. It's not that they're broken, it's that their brains are still running a program that helped them to survive a long time ago. We see that ripple effect through all kinds of things like school, work, even adult relationships and adult mental health. Trauma isn't just an event, it's an adaptation, and that those adaptations can sometimes come at a cost. So imagine like a Formula One race, like a car that's flying around the track. It's built for speed and made to win, but no car wins alone. It needs a pit crew, a race engineer, and a team of strategists. The race team keeps changing its mind about priorities. The driver's told to overtake, then to stop and hold back, and then silence, and sometimes they don't get anything at all, mixed with the odd scream or rant. The driver learns to stop asking questions. They just try to get through the race, one corner at a time. Imagine the engine being pushed to its absolute limit. No pit stops, no tyre changes. The pit crew are untrustworthy and sometimes they're just not there. Other race teams have access to a stable crew, a manager who knows when to push, when to pull back. They stop when they need to, they refuel when required, and there's always a trusted team around them to build. But our driver, they're still out there, lap after lap until the race is finished. Still fast, still fighting, but the brakes are fading. The tyres are getting worn and things are starting to rattle in the engine. And sure, they might finish the race, but how many races can anyone run like this? That's what childhood trauma does. It's not about whether the child survives, it's about what cost it comes to keep going. So let's think about this in a case. Think about the obvious one. You know the kid I'm talking about. Maybe there's a history of abuse at home or out there on the streets. Maybe it's all in the files. Or maybe it's just a rumour. But when you're with them, you can feel it. It's not in their eyes, it's in their body. Every bump, every laugh, every unexpected noise. Their neck snaps back to see what's going on behind them. Who's there? What's happening? Like, am I safe? This isn't their nerve. This isn't butterflies. So in your work, what adaptations have you seen in your young people that tell you everything without them having to say a word? What behaviours, reactions and habits do you see? The signs that hint that they've been through difficult stuff. Share your insights in the comments and let me know, what are the secret signs of trauma and hypervigilance that you've noticed in your client? Trauma doesn't damage the brain, it reprograms it. The brain isn't broken, it's just adapted, not to thrive, but to survive. But here's the catch. Some of these adaptations that kept you safe back then are the things that are going to hold you back now. Let's think about how this works. If fighting kept you safe, your brain wires for that. And if hiding worked, it wires for that instead. But those same strategies don't switch off because you've got out of danger. You're still on high alert, even when you're in school, in the cafe, or just out with your mates. If someone looks at you funny, you go on the offensive. If a teacher asks you to read out a section aloud in class, you freeze, run, or avoid. That's not bad behavior. That's the brain doing its job, just in the wrong environment. This is called mismatching of strategies. What helps you survive causes difficulties in normal, regular, safe society. So how can we visualize this? Think of it like a fire alarm. It's designed to go off whenever there's a real life threat, like a fire. But in some systems, the wiring becomes super sensitive. And instead of reacting to serious amounts of smoke, it starts going off for burnt toast, a steaming hot pan, or someone lighting a cigarette from across the room. And this alarm's wired to go off extra loud. That's what trauma can do to a young person's brain. Early on in life, the brain wires itself to detect even the smallest hint of threat, because missing danger could cost you everything, so the alarm becomes overactive by design. It's not broken, It's just tuned for survival in a dangerous world. But in a safe environment, that same alarm goes off too often, too loudly, and for all the wrong reasons. So think about the young people growing up in homes filled with shouting, arguments, maybe even violence between adults. How do they cope? Maybe they retreat. Maybe they hide away in their room, bury themselves in books or zone out with headphones on when things are kicking off at home. Maybe they learn to disappear mentally, emotionally, and maybe even physically, because that's what keeps them safe. If we fast forward now to a school classroom where attendance has been patchy, routines are being chaotic, and now they're doing some class they really don't like. So their brain does what it's wired to do. It checks out mentally. They stare into space, drift off, and disappear again, just like they do at home. It's about survival. Anytime they feel uncertain, overwhelmed, or unsafe, their brain pulls a safety lever they learned back then. Get small, go quiet, and disappear. It worked before, but not now. Now it looks like they're not trying, like they're not engaging, like they're not listening to instruction. But that's not the full story. What it is a survival strategy playing out in plain sight. That means when people finally calm down, when things finally get safe, the brain misreads the piece as a trap. So think about the young people you're supporting. In what ways have you seen unexpected and what should be low-level stressors create massive changes in a young person's presentation or behaviour? Comment down below. Young people who grow up in chaotic or harmful environments are experts at scanning for danger, spotting threats, and choosing fast, protective responses to stay safe. Here's the problem. Those same strategies come at a cost. They might be more prone to anger or struggle with sadness, fear, or shame. Thinking ahead, planning, weighing up consequences are often concepts well out of reach for these young people. On the surface, it looks like they're choosing negative behaviors to cope, but it's way more complicated. Their brains simply aren't wired for safety. They're calibrated for survival. So when everyday stressors show up, like a boundary violation, a tone of voice, a moment of uncertainty, their stress system triggers fast and takes over. The long-term rational planning part of their brain turns off, and all that matters is surviving right now, no matter what the consequences. This works well when there's no food at home and you need to steal something from a local shop to survive. But it's not so good if your best mate gives you a questionable tackle on the football field and you couldn't let that slide in front of the other lads. When you've grown up in chaos, your brain becomes like an SAS point man. Kick the door down first, ask questions later. If the radio's scrambled, if your stress system's misreading situations, you don't wait for clarification, you act now. That might look like aggression, shouting, or even self-sabotaging behaviour, but it's not about bad behaviour. It's about brains trained for battle, misfiring in places that are meant to be safe. The worst part, once all the dust settles, they're yet again left picking up the pieces. And the more this happens, the harder it becomes to trust themselves and navigate around the world. That is stress generation. And if we don't understand it, we risk punishing survival instincts instead of helping them build new safe strategies. Trauma wires your brain to feel stress more intensely. You act out on impulse without thinking through the consequences. You solve one problem by creating two more in a consistent cycle of chaos. Surely that's enough. Well, unfortunately, it's not. The next problem is social thinning. If you're working in care, in schools, or with at-risk youth, especially those involved in crime, you'll have seen this yourself. They know everyone, but they're close to no one. Always surrounded, but somehow still on the outside. Why is friendship the one thing that could help so hard for young people who've got histories of trauma? Let's imagine a boy, John. Dad's no longer around. And mum's ex, well, he still drops in occasionally. They use drugs most weekends and regularly throw loud parties that rage on in the early hours. They're shouting, screaming, loud music, and strangers going in and out of the house. There's a couple of kids in there, and they're often sent to bed hungry, anxious, and told not to leave the bedroom. Every morning, John's got to get up before the others because he's the one that sorts out breakfast. If he's not there to provide it, he knows his siblings are going to school hungry. He gets his brothers dressed and somehow makes it to school himself. Probably exhausted, unprepared, and he definitely didn't do last night's homework. He doesn't understand the work. Instead of asking for help, he acts up. It's easier to get kicked out than admit that you're lost and confused and you don't get it. He cracks jokes and disrupts lessons. He walks out when things get too intense and teachers start to see him as a problem pupil. His name comes up in behaviour panels all the time and he's put eventually on a part-time timetable. He's got one-to-one support, but he kind of stops going. He thinks to himself, what's the point of going to school 2 hours a week when I can't even go play with my mates? Eventually the school says they can't meet his needs and he's being excluded because of lack of attendance and behaviour problems. He sits at home waiting nearly a year for a new placement, and the only place available is a sports-based provision. Mostly other boys with similar situations and similar histories. The timetables are short, maybe 3 days a week, with plenty of time to drift. Maybe he starts smoking a bit of weed and starts smoking most days. He gets into bits and bobs of trouble, but nothing too major. In the afternoons, he's waiting around. Imagine this pattern continues for a couple of years. Little bits and bobs of education, little bits and bobs of trouble, and basically chilling with your antisocial mates. One afternoon, he's waiting around with nothing to do. He sees a group of his old classmates queuing for the bus. They're in uniform, they look clean, they're chatting, they're laughing. So he decides to walk over. But he notices they freeze. He's not the same anymore. He's got a joint in his hand, he swears a lot, and he's always spitting on the floor. This is the way he carries himself now. He sees this in their faces. It's not hatred, but it's just this sense of hesitation, confusion or discomfort. Maybe even a little bit of pity. And in that moment he decides, I'm not one of them anymore. School isn't for me. Over time, John wasn't just excluded from his lessons, he was excluded from his peer group, from the opportunity to form a sense of belonging. That's the quiet erosion of social thinning. The longer this goes on, the fewer healthy relationships a young person has. That sense of abandonment and instability deepens, and eventually, it's the only world they see themselves fitting into. They just don't fit in anywhere else. What other concepts and ideas does psychology provide us with to help us better understand and support the young people we're working with? Check out this video because that's exactly what it's designed for.